Hello, and welcome to another edition of Exclusive Interview, coming to you from the studios of 84 TV Radio Abuja, Nigeria. My name is Stanley Bentu. Nigeria's President, Muhammadu Buhari, recently listed 9 areas that his administration would prioritize during his remaining years in office. He listed those priority areas to include improved access to quality education, healthcare, power supply, and poverty reduction. On today's edition of the program, we take a look at the key issues, especially with regards to government policies and decisions.
A few minutes ago, sworn by the Holy Book, I intend to keep my oath and serve as president to all Nigerians. I belong to everybody, and I belong to nobody.
May 29, 2017, Muhammadu Buhari, a retired general and former head of state, returned to the pinnacle of power in Nigeria after 30 years. It has been just over 5 years of his administration in charge of Nigeria, not far from the halfway mark of a second term in office. In the lead-up to the 2015 elections, the Buhari campaign made 171 promises to Nigerians at different campaign stops and in several documents, forming the basis of a social contract between the incoming government and the people whose votes they sought. Today, Nigeria stands at a crossroads between problems and potential, the outcome of which is largely dependent on the quality of decisions taken by the nation's leaders and their resolve to implement them as honestly as possible. On the show today, Exclusive Interview speaks to Ajuri Ngelale, Senior Special Assistant to President Buhari on Public Affairs, to get an insight on exactly how the current administration is tackling Nigeria's perennial challenges.
On today's episode of the program, we talk to the Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on Public Affairs, and his name is Ajuri Ngelale. Ajuri, it's a pleasure to have you here. It's great to see you again.
It's truly humbling to be with you. Thank you for having me.
And I'll shake your hand, but protocols.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. But the love is unchanging.
Absolutely. And, we'll just get right to it. First of all, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. It's been operational for quite some time now. Give us a breakdown of what are some of the achievements and the challenges.
Thank you very much. Well, certainly with the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, we've now essentially come to the conclusion of that with the phasing in of the Nigeria Economic Sustainability Plan. And one of the things that we look back on with a lot of satisfaction is the provision of infrastructure contained within that particular plan. You would recall that from 2017 consistently through 2019, which really was the life of the ERGP, we had unprecedented expenditure on capital expenditure on infrastructure projects nationwide. Obviously, with the Sukuk bonds, 44 different roads across all geopolitical zones, encompassing all states of the Federation, federal roads being reconstructed and employing tens of thousands of our people in the process. We've also been able to prioritize hydroelectric dams, gas-fired power plants, like Zungero Dam, of course, 700 megawatts. Then, of course, you have the Kaduna power plant of about 215 megawatts, which is nearing completion as well. So there's been extensive work, I think. But if you look at the challenges on the flip side of that, there's no doubt that there was certain inadequacies in terms of what the final product, final outcomes were of the ERGP. And I think it's fair to say that in view of what were very real and acute political challenges, to be very specific, if you look at the interaction between the executive branch and the Eighth National Assembly. You may recall an unprecedented slate of budget padding scandals where very important projects that were critical to the implementation of the RGP were deliberately defunded by the leadership of the Eighth National Assembly in view of their political calculation that indeed if they defunded certain projects that it would hinder President Muhammadu Buhari's re-election chances. Obviously, we've seen that strategy fall through the cracks, but nonetheless, in view of the challenges, they are real challenges, but I would say that in view of those challenges, there were certainly positive outcomes, which we can now build on.
Quite interesting. Agriculture is one of the areas that the President has focused on, rice production.
Sure. And
I think if we've learned anything over the years is that Nigeria can no longer sustainably depend on commodities. So, what is the government doing to fundamentally shift the country from that reliability on commodities to a more industrial exporting country?
Absolutely. You really hit the nail on the head with that question, because that's really the fulcrum of what the president wants to achieve. Let's start with agriculture. Of course, as you rightly referred to, that is essentially the hub of the president's diversification plan, if there is a hub. And I say that because if you look at the tremendous progress that's been recorded over the last 5 years, in terms of millions of low-interest credit facilities granted to smallholder farmers across the nation, approximately 2.6 million to be precise, under the Anchor Borrowers Program within the Central Bank of Nigeria. In addition to that, the president had been able to cut the cost of fertilizer in the country by 50% by revitalizing over 31 fertilizer blending plants across the country that had gone moribund over the last few decades. That has gone a long way, in addition to the provision of seedlings and, of course, the facilities to really bolster agricultural production along value chains. But I think specifically speaking, if you look at where we've really made tremendous progress and with real financial windfall for the country, you talk about rice, which you referred to already quite correctly, is first of all, we were in 2015. I always say to people that it's important for us to contextualize our development on the basis of where we are and where we are now as we look to where we're going. And in rice, you recall that in 2015 we were actually the largest importer of rice as a nation across the entire African continent. What a shame. We have now moved within 5 years from being the largest importer of rice on the continent to now being the largest producer of rice on the continent. You really can't have a more significant shift than that. And in financial terms, you're moving from $3 billion US dollars being spent on rice importation every single year from 2010 to 2015 to a situation now where we've been able to cut that down by about 97%. And obviously now we're moving very close to food self-sufficiency. Unfortunately, this year, of course, we've just had floods in Kebbi State, which will probably keep us away from that for a few additional months. But we are now at the cusp of self-sufficiency, which will now take us to the next level that we all want to talk about, which is moving from import to self-sufficiency, but then self-sufficiency now to export. And that's really critical, because really now that we're at the self-sufficiency point, because a lot of people have asked me the question, why is it that we hear President Muhammadu Buhari and the administration talking a lot about diversification and all of that, but when we look at the financial figures, 90% of our foreign exchange revenues are still coming from the oil and gas sector. So are you leveling with us? And what I always tell people is it's important to understand that there are 3 levels to this thing. There's import dependency where we were. Then you have to get to self-sufficiency before you can get to export dependency. And we are at that self-sufficiency point, which we have not been in decades. And now it's saying, okay, now that we've successfully substituted our imports with local production, now it's a matter of boosting production to the point where we now have the surplus that we can sell on the international export market. And that's where I think the Nigeria Economic Sustainability Plan comes in, because really it is a 12-month economic stimulus plan that's going to serve as a bridge from the end of the ERGP, which is now concluded, to the beginning of the next National Development Plan that's being reeled out in December this year, which will run from 2021 to 2025. So you have a 12-month bridge. And within the bridge, within agriculture, we've struck a deal with the 36 state governments of the Federation for them to give the federal government between 20,000 and 100,000 hectares of land each, that we will, in exchange for the land, will employ millions of young Nigerians who will, first of all, clear the land, which will essentially expand our stock of arable, cultivatable land, and then they're going to then cultivate targeted high-value export commodities. These are cash crops, like cashew, cocoa, and the like, that can really earn us a bang for our buck on the international food export market. So there's really a lot going on in terms of diversification. We're really excited about the fact that by 2023, we'll finally reach that place where we'll see the 90% foreign exchange earnings from oil and gas eventually whittle down to 85, then 80, and then you're now going to have 25, 30 agriculture as we move along.
Well, Nigeria has been struggling with the question of income, and we really got hit hard during the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak with the collapse in oil prices, and we've been speaking for many years about moving away from dependency on oil, and one of those one Achilles heel that we've always had is that the refining of our petroleum within the country and what we consume. So a lot of our wealth ultimately leaves the country by the imports of petrol that we have, and you know, in Nigeria we do love our cars.
Absolutely.
So why haven't we fixed the refinery problem? Not the refineries, but the question of refineries. Why haven't we found an answer to that?
No, it's a fantastic question, and it really lies at the heart of what we need to do in terms of self-sufficiency across sectors. When you look at the refining situation, particularly petroleum refining, you would have crude oil refining, rather. You would have a situation whereby, obviously, from 1999 to 2015, there was no shortage of expertise in this country. We knew what to do. We had the money to do it. But what you had was a lack of political intention, a lack of political will and moral intention to actually see it through. You had a deliberate agenda to be able to use the broken down state of our refineries as a means of siphoning massive amounts of money, because of course it's a very expensive process to refurbish these refineries or bring them back to life. Now what we've done since 2015 is we've been saying, look, okay, the president was granted a few options by his advisors, particularly the central bank governor and others, who essentially said, sir, we can sell these refineries, which we built at the cost of about between $4 and $5 billion. We can sell these refineries as scrap for $150 million. Just sell them off. Or we can invest in the refineries, build them back up to a respectable figure in terms of output. Let's get them to 90% functionality. And then we can now potentially take that investment, and instead of selling scrap metal, now you're selling at $3 billion, if that's what you want to do. $3.5 billion you could sell them for. So now the president obviously took the long. He's a visionary. He looks into the future. He's not a short-term man in terms of short-term gratification. He said, okay, fine. Let's get the experts who were part of the initial design, the initial process, and bring them in. So now what we've done, in effect, where we are right now, is we have invested in bringing in the investors from ENI, an major Italian oil and gas conglomerate globally. They are coming in because they were part of the initial design process and initial engineering and procurement. So they've now come in with the specific design, knowing how to refurbish it, and they have now completed phase one of the Port Harcourt refinery, which is the largest one of them all. So that process is ongoing. The GMD of NNPC, Mele Kyari, has promised Nigerians that his own legacy as the GMD of NNPC lies on a promise that by May 2023, the Port Harcourt refinery will have reached 90% refining capacity, up from the moribund state that it has been over the last few years. We finally have a model which is essentially that ENI will come in, they'll do the major part of the investments, and in exchange for the conclusion of that process, we can now essentially give them some sort of an opportunity to operate and then transfer it back over a period of time. The last point I'll make is on modular refineries. We have, under this administration, given out licenses to legitimate operators who have established 3 modular refineries, one in Delta State, one in River State, and one in Imo State, that have reached about 90% completion on average between the 3 of them, and by next year all of them will be on stream, and that will be about 50,000 barrels per day of new refining capacity. So there's a lot going on in addition to, of course, the Dangote refinery next year.
Thank you very much. We will take a break, but don't go away, because when we come back, we'll be talking about Nigeria's place in the new economy that has been created by the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Exclusive Interview, and I've been having a chat with Ajuri Ngalale, who's the Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on Public Affairs. Well, we've been looking at Nigeria, the sustainability of our economic growth plan, but we had a game changer that came in earlier this year, COVID-19. Nobody saw it coming, and it's created a new kind of economic ecosystem. And I was speaking to a development economist recently, and he talked about some of the the new things that this economy has thrown up. For instance, the digital economy, e-learning. So where does Nigeria fit into all of this? Yeah, especially when you consider that over the years we've not made too much progress in going digital and in the knowledge economy.
Absolutely, great question. So we're really excited about what we've done over the last 5 years, and more importantly, what we're going to do over the next 3. First of all, the president came in and he said, look, we have to deepen our broadband penetration from the approximately 35%. About 20% that we were in 2015, to get to 70%, between 80 and 90% by 2023. That is the target. We're happy to report that over the first 5 years of this administration, due to the reforms undertaken by the Nigeria Communications Commission and the investments that were made therein, we've been able to deepen penetration now, broadband penetration in the country, from approximately 15 to 20% up to about 45%. We're really happy with that, because it means that we're very much on course to meet our target by 2023. Now, one of the strategic initiatives that this administration put forward, in addition to the massive investments in cabling that have taken place over the last 5 years, is regulation-wise. We've been able to really remove a lot of the encumbrances to investment that have existed now for decades. Specifically speaking, we've been able to waive all charges, all right-of-way charges for broadband cabling on federal highways across this country. Totally, 100% waiver. So whereas you would have to pay literally meter by meter of cabling for right-of-way charges through federal highways before, we've 100% waived that. In addition to that, we have not rested on our oars. We've worked closely with state governments, PDP, APC, ABGA, everybody, and partnered with them to say, look, if you can reduce your right-of-way charges in terms of land use, then we can actually get cabling into the nooks and crannies of your state, so that you can be more attractive for future investment in terms of industry and factories and even high-tech schools and vocational facilities, etc. So states have recognized that, wait, there's an opportunity here, and they've been working with us. Kwara, Ekiti, Lagos, and some other states have really keyed into that. So in addition to the kind of the regulation in terms of making sure that right-of-way is cheaper, so that the MTNs and the GLOs can be encouraged to expedite and expand their investments in cabling, we've also targeted the core academic infrastructure, educational infrastructure. So we've put in place a fund of about approximately $1 billion that we've received from the World Bank. And what's really critical is all the borrowings under this administration of the president said, look, we cannot borrow for recurrent expenditure, or salaries as it's known. we have to borrow only for capital expenditure investments in the future. That is roads, rails, bridges, airports, seaports, power stations, and the like, or schools or hospitals. So what we've done is we've just secured, and this is very recent, within the last 3 months or so, $1 billion from the World Bank that is specifically what we call P4R. This is pay for results. So unlike the previous borrowings under previous administrations where they would take out a Eurobond of $3 billion, and I don't want to get too political, but this is a development issue, they'll take out $3 billion at once with no real accountability or focus as to what they're going to spend the money on, but they have access to it in a tranche. What President Muhammadu Buhari has done is he said every piece of borrowing that we're doing for capital expenditure must be tied to a project. So if we're taking $1 billion, I want to know exactly what the $1 billion is even before I ask for it. So the Nigerian government is making a proposal to the World Bank, and we're saying we're going to do this with this money. And so on the basis of that, we're asking for the approval. That's the way that borrowing has been done with the Chinese, with the World Bank, with whatever multilateral we're working with. So now, with P4R, we bring the funds to the state governments because, of course, they're in charge with the bulk of education infrastructure being primary education. And we basically say to them, okay, on the basis of your performance, so if you tell us you're going to build 12 schools across 12 local governments or 20 schools across 12 local governments, on the basis of the progress of those projects, we will then release another tranche and another tranche and another tranche until it's completed. But we'll only release tranches on the basis of your performance, which we can go in, we can audit, and we can verify. And that's the change that Mr. President has brought. And that's ultimately what's going to allow us to build the academic infrastructure of the future.
Now, there are people who would say that, yes, they can understand perfectly why Nigeria would have to borrow in order for infrastructural development, because we simply are not earning that much.
And most nations do borrow for infrastructure.
They do, certainly. But there are others who argue that Nigeria as a country, going by its track record, has not had the kind of discipline or transparency to be able to pay these loans over a period of, say, 20, 30, or 40 years. And there is also concerns that even though the current administration may, in all its efforts, keep to its word on these payments, we do have the challenge of policy somersaults over the years. And this is perhaps the reason why a lot of people feel nervous and apprehensive about particularly the China loans. Right. So how would you respond to that?
Yeah, thank you very much, because it really has been a cause of kind of great debate in the country. First of all, let's acknowledge something. The Chinese loans come at an average maturity of about 20 years, with an average interest rate ranging from between 0.5% and 3%. You compare that with any borrowing you get from anywhere in the world, whether it's from the World Bank, which on average they'll give you between 4 and 7%, or whether it's on the international bond market. When you want to get a Eurobond, you're looking at between 7 and 10%. If you want to borrow from the U.S., you want to borrow from all these other institutions, you're looking at between 5 and 8%. There's no one that competes with China in terms of favorable terms. What gets lost in the national conversation, and really I think across the African continent, is a focus on facts, and a focus on empirical data to say, look, what is it? Why is it that the Chinese loans are so attractive to African countries? It's because they have been able to outbid other sources with very low interest loan facilities. And when you are a country that is thinking of tomorrow, and you're thinking of debt servicing, how you're going to pay back the debt, your focus is on making sure that the interest rates are as low as possible so that repayment is the least kind of burden that it can possibly be. And you're also focused on targeted investments to make sure that, unlike previous administrations in this country that borrowed both tranches of money from the Eurobonds to IMF or this or that with all sorts of laxity and lack of transparency, what we've said is everything we borrow must be an investment. And to the point of repayment, which is very important, is if you are investing in infrastructure that people can see, a second Niger bridge, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the Abuja International Airport, Kano International Airport, Port Harcourt International Airport, Kano Ibiam International Airport in Enugu, Lagos International Airport, all these airports that are coming up between this year and next year. Port Harcourt was done in 2018. These are investments that will pay you back because these are investments that attract further investment. So for us, our focus is on making sure that we have the transportation infrastructure, the economic kind of foundation stones that will enable us to have a robust economy that's sustainably diversified into agriculture, into manufacturing, into construction, into all of these industries that are dependent on power plants being built, on dams like Mambila or like Zungeru that are being built with Chinese loans. Those are the investments that will allow you to repay. And so that's
just really quick. I think I would like to maybe for you to speak on something from your own perspective.
Right.
Wouldn't there be a need for buy-in? Because if only the president believes in this, or the president and a few others who are working with him, and perhaps the larger political party or even the opposition political party does not believe that, doesn't it become like almost a no-win situation for Nigeria if, with our history of policy flip-flops, you have another administration that comes in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, and says, okay, look, my focus is not this, and then these defaults come in. How do we ensure sustainability?
Well, it's important to understand too that when we talk about defaults in terms of debt repayment and the like, the history of it has to do with the fact that we did not have a republic that was steady. You had constant military interventions, constant set of military interregnums, and obviously, when you have that kind of mishmash of governing structure between civilian, then military, then civilian, then military, there's not the consistency. But from the Fourth Republic, when we had debt forgiveness early on, from 1999 through 2005. What we've seen is obviously a consistency in terms of civilian rule. And yes, even though you do have different parties that may have disagreements, one thing is sure, which is if you are making wise investments, which this president is, that's why I really emphasize the issue of project-tied loans. The president takes out loans that will be fully paid to the contractor during his time in office. Why is that relevant? Because when you fully pay a contractor 100% of the funds that are due to them to complete a job, then regardless of whether you are in office or whether it's your successor in office, they have been mobilized already. All they have to do now is construct whatever it is that they need to construct, whether it's a rail line, whether it's an airport, whether it's a power plant. And that's the wisdom of the president at work. Every project that he's put in place in terms of borrowing, or even if Nigeria is funding it from our own revenues, because you have a mix of both borrowing and what we're funding from our revenues. The president has put in mechanisms to ensure that regardless of who takes over from him, all the projects that he started must be completed. And I'll just add this point. For the first time in our history, certainly within the Fourth Republic, the president, in the presentation of the 2020 budget, made an open declaration for the first time in our history that said no new project will be placed in any budget from 2020 to 2023 until every project that has been placed in our budgets from 2015 to 2019 are fully budgeted to the point where they have been completed. Until projects have been completed, there will be no new projects. And that is why, that is how the president is fighting against policy somersault and the future threat potentially of a policy somersault.
Well, my final question to you would be about, some controversy that has been stirred up on the Kama Act, especially one aspect of it where religious institutions are complaining about being taxed. But there are some aspects of that have not been looked into in detail. So could you explain to us exactly what is being taxed and why?
Thank you very much. So the issue of Kama, it does a few things. Before, if you don't mind, if I could just mention one or two things.
Very quickly.
Very quickly. Of course, there's an up to 65% savings on those registering, the process of registering a business in Nigeria in the Corporate Affairs Commission, and amongst other things. But to your point, the kind of segment that caused some form of controversy in the media was the issue of the regulation of charitable organizations and nonprofits. Now, within that, in effect, what we've done is we have now aligned Nigeria's corporate registration process in terms of non-profits and charitable organizations with international convention. So you have the United Kingdom Charities Commission, which allows them the power to ensure that non-profits and charitable organizations are not being used as points through which fraudulent actors, corrupt politicians can launder money internationally, for example. So what we've done is to align with that. Now, what has brought controversy is not the issue of taxing non-profits or taxing charitable organizations. It's really closing the loopholes through which these organizations have been used by politicians, whether it be not just churches, even though so much of the hullabaloo in the media has to do with churches and pastors.
Exactly.
But it goes so far beyond churches and pastors. I mean, it involves mosques and imams. It involves NGOs that deal with a plethora of issues, from anti-corruption-based NGOs, educational-based NGOs, environmental-based NGOs, all NGOs. So all of them are together in this blanket to say, look, you cannot be a non-government or a non-profit organization or a charitable organization claiming to be charitable, but you are diverting funds that you say are for a particular purpose through your organization on behalf of corrupt actors trying to turn bad, illegitimate money into good, legitimate money through these NGOs. So we've cut those loopholes, and that is obviously coming at the expense of individuals who have benefited to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars who would not want that reform. But I can assure you it's in the best interest of Nigerians, and any unbiased observer who has assessed similar law in the UK, in the US, and in Singapore would find that all we've done is to align with international convention, nothing similar, nothing different, nothing spectacular in that regard.
Well, on that note, I would just like to say thank you very much, Ajuri, for taking the time to come here and talk to us.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll be right back. Indeed, that was a very enlightening session with the Senior Special Assistant to President Muhammadu Buhari on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngalale. And that's it for today's edition of Exclusive Interview. Until we come your way again next time, thanks for stopping by.